Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Stories That Shape Us. My name is Joanna Daniel. Now, all week I've been dealing with the subject of abuse. Just one post that really got me uh, riled up. I don't know, just tapping into the passion I'm going to say that I have around abuse and the passion for educating people around abuse because I know quite a lot of people don't understand it, don't know it. A lot of people in church leadership don't understand and know it. And I know women who are Christians stay in an abusive relationship longer than an on average than a woman who isn't a Christian. I know that women in the Christian community often go to church leadership first for help and support, and it's often not found because they don't understand abuse. And the women, they often use spiritual language. I don't know how we listen in church that made us not understand and hear abuse when that's clearly who Jesus is not. But I also know that it's a issue of education. It's an issue of training and understanding abuse. I don't know. It should be a part of training for everybody who's training to be a leader. Everybody who's training to be a pastor it should be a part of the curriculum for pastors, social workers, counselors, anybody who is in the caring profession. Domestic abuse should be understanding abuse, dealing with sexual abuse, dealing with allegations should be a part of the training and education. Unfortunately, it's not in some places. Maybe it's been integrated more now because we're talking about it more now. But if you trained in a place where it wasn't, chances are you wouldn't know. And so that's why I do what I do. The work that I've done throughout this week, go back and listen to all on the playlist that says podcast. Listen to all the series on your YouTube. You can find it on Spotify and also on Apple Podcast around stories that shape us with Joanna Daniel. And I've dealt with abuse all week. Today, I would like to talk about the trauma informed church leadership. What are some of the things that would be involved in a trauma informed approach to church leadership? It's the beginning of the year. I know lots of churches are doing leadership training. There should be some trauma informed teaching involved in getting people ready to serve for the 2023. We really have to do something different in 2023 so that we can reach a part of the population that is not available and accessible because they're in pain. The woman that comes to your church and the perpetrator that's right in your midst, isolating her by telling stories about her in the congregation. We need a trauma informed approach. When we have a trauma informed approach to leadership, we can hear without it being spelled out. And one of the most beautiful things is being seen, is being heard. I'm doing a tour ahead of our conference in Swansea, and I'm inviting you to our conference in Swansea, April 8 and 9 at the Swansea Seventh Adventist Church, and it's called Come See a Man. And it's based on John 4:29, that conversation that Jesus had with the woman at the well. We are releasing a devotional written by 12 women in our community, and we're having a conference to tie everything together April 8 and 9. You can find the details below this video and below in the podcast description where you can register for the conference. We're still in the early bird season. And I'm doing that because he saw the woman at the well. Jesus saw the woman. He didn't condemn her, he didn't judge her, he knew her issues. And so when we are doing leadership in church, we need to have the ability to see people and hear them so it doesn't have to be spelled out, right? If you want Come See a Man tour to come to your church, send me a message and we'll be happy to. We have some dates available from May onward. So one of the things that a trauma informed church leadership will address barriers to identifying victims. We need to learn how to address barriers in identifying victims of abuse. So what would that look like? Ongoing training needs to be available. Ongoing training to be able to challenge bias, to educate around abuse, to build self-awareness. Ongoing training. When people are trained, then they get to have information. They begin to understand. They begin to see things and know things that they didn't know before. People are elected to church leadership, never having this kind of training. To be honest, to be fair, Some don't even have leadership skills or training, but they're put in leadership. We can't have leaders just because of a gender. It needs to be more than that. I think we're in 2023, and I don't know, the church is catching on. Lots of churches are catching on to the fact that people want more from leadership. And it's not just gender can't be the sole deciding factor in who becomes a leader. Character and education and training. When I say education, I don't mean you need a degree. I mean you need to be educated in how to communicate, manage yourself, manage people, and listen effectively. Those are really basic skills. A commitment to helping victims identify support and provide ongoing care as a trauma-informed leadership. And a church that is trauma-informed, you will be committed to be helping victims to identify support. You will also be able to identify barriers to access for certain people in your community, in your congregation. Lots of women have barriers to access. How are you going to support them in overcoming those barriers? Sometimes you might need to stand before someone. You might need to be the front-facing person that contacts the organization because the woman might have some barriers to access. And if you have a heart for the wounded and brokenhearted, as Jesus did, this is something that will be not hard for you to do. Have an appropriate referral scheme. An appropriate referral scheme. So that's going to mean that you're going to attend trainings in your local community. You're going to communicate all the time with the police. You're going to know the domestic abuse support services. You're going to understand how social services run and the things that they do in their assessment of risk. You're going to know support services, family support services in your area. Who are the therapists that works with trauma, not marriage counseling? When there's abuse, marriage counseling is not advised. So you're going to need to know all the support services that are available in your area. It wouldn't be hard to gather support services. Here are some tips to do that. If you are living in a community, if your church is in a community where there's a university, every year they do Freshers Week and they do fairs. All of these services sometimes are there. You can go collect leaflets, put them up in your church, have them in your church office, give it to each leader, go through it and read it together, have sessions that you discuss and talk about, but you need to have an appropriate referral scheme. Sometimes you might need to know a named person in an organization that you can ring up and refer your people to, right? You need to have a designated trained person where people can go to disclose, a designated trained person. And everybody needs to know that this person did the work that they do. They need to be trained, not just designated. I know some churches that have safeguarding officers who really don't understand safeguarding. So it needs to be a designated trained. If you are going to have a safeguarding officer that deals with all the safeguarding in the church, please get them appropriate training. They need to understand abuse. And it cannot be the church's response of working through it in prayer. That works. We need to do that too. But they need to know when victims are at risk. 2 women every week die from domestic abuse. We don't want anybody to die on your watch, right? Also, this person needs to be confidential. Confidentiality for victims after disclosure. Let them tell their own story. I can't tell you how many times I'm at a church. This weekend, I was in a church speaking and talked about confidentiality or talk about disclosure and speaking, and people are saying, well, where do we speak? Because nobody's confidential. We really need confidentiality. I know not everybody has the capacity to listen to abuse. Even if this person's in leadership, they don't always have the capacity to hear because people are carrying their own stuff. And that's why the designated trained person are also going to have clinical support. You need to pay for supervision for the designated person to have the capacity to hear. Because if they have several roles, plus they have their own lives and their jobs, and this is a volunteer work that they're doing, they might not have a space to hear. And so telling it to the church leader, to another church leader, might not be gossip. It might just be too much to carry. But when they have a supervision and a place to go with it that can direct them and advise them, then, confidentiality might be maintained better. And finally, I want to say connection with local services who can help. And that's probably part of the having a referral scheme. Now, a church that is trauma informed will have these things in place. Will have these things in place. Now, I could go into having groups and how you do prayer and how you do Bible study and the things that are said, how emotional language is integrated over time in your in sermons and in everything that you do in the church. And so the whole ethos of the church will be trauma informed. And that might take time, but for now, a good place for you to start is to have trauma informed church leadership, train your people, have access to support, knowing what the barriers are, connection with agencies, and confidentiality, a place and a space where people can go and safely share their stories of abuse and know that they're going to be heard and looked after. The whole board don't need to know what's happening. The whole board can't manage it. The abuser might have allies on the board and it won't be safe for the victim. So that's why it can't be the board and it can't be the church at members meeting. It has to be designated people so that victims are kept safe. Thank you for joining me in this series of stories that shape us. I hope you'll join me in the next story. And before I go, I want to invite you to follow me on Instagram at oncescars.com because I'm going to carry on this conversation through reels and short videos over there. So join me. Take care.